Welcome back to another amazing episode of Crusty Car News. We have 5 smashing stories today. The first story is what do new car buyers actually value? Is it reliability? Possibly style technology? We'll explain. The second story, the only types of cars you should be thinking about buying today. The third story, there is a cheap new truck that has Ford rolling in their graves. The fourth story, there is a car loan crisis. Hope you're not part of that problem. And the fifth story, we're gonna share some of the best, most affordable family 3-row SUVs and vehicles available in the market today. Grab your favorite beverage and sit back for the ride. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. So the first story is, what do new car buyers actually value? I mean, a lot of times people do like to value the latest technology, vehicles that are fuel efficient, great performance machines, or some people just like and value cheap, reliable, long-lasting vehicles. What type of vehicle do you value? And you'll be shocked at what the rest of the population is buying today.
The priorities of the new car buyer have changed significantly in the last numerous years. Now you're starting to see many more people prioritize things like performance, style, as well as a lot of the technology, safety tech, the latest big screens, the latest haptic controls, the latest electronics. And to say you have the latest 14.1-inch screen in their center display means that you've probably upped out your buddy there who's only got a 12-inch unit. But because it seems that modern new car buyers have a different priority than they did even 5 or 10 years ago. 5 or 10 years ago, they enjoyed cars that were reliable, designed to last a long time, designed to go for hundreds of thousands of miles. Hence, lo and behold, we have a car like a Toyota Camry, as well as other vehicles like this, including the Honda Accord. Many Mazdas are also very reliable cars for their simplicity. They're still using torque converter autos. They're still using basic 4-cylinder engines that are, in some cases, are naturally aspirated. And a lot of these vehicles, unfortunately, are not selling because they're given way to cars with the latest technology, high performance numbers, and bragging rights that you have the latest, hottest new vehicle. But times have changed. People have moved on for buying basic vehicles like this, basic mode of transportation, or even simple vehicles that have a known level of reliability seem to be less appealing. While sales are still steady, and quite often you're finding people now gravitating more to the high technologically advanced vehicles, hybrids, high tech, big screens, and all of the latest technology that you can muster up, including a lot of the safety features that a lot of people put a lot of value in. A lot of these older vehicles simply did not have that technology. Backup cameras, accident avoidance technology, lane departure technology. But rather they use simple features like a basic key access, or even simple mirrors quite often that you just had to push in or out. There's no LED headlights on vehicles like this either. The latest craze has owners of vehicles like these that traditionally were very reliable no longer buying these vehicles. These are not as popular. And we know that Toyota and Honda are some of the brands that still sell cars. That market and industry is dying as a whole. Because while traditional car owners will value vehicles that will run hundreds of thousands of miles, vehicles that are easy to fix, easy to maintain, and in some cases easy to replace parts even at home for a simple do-it-yourselfer. Those types of owners value vehicles that will last for 10, 15, or 20 years. But due to a few major reasons, CAFE standards to have better and better fuel economy every single year, it's trying to improve those numbers. Carbon emissions are all factors that a lot of car manufacturers are having to adhere to. So those are things that are mandated, but a lot of car buyers are saying that's fine, because a lot of car buyers see owning a vehicle now as more like owning a cell phone, which is basically a throwaway feature. And you buy it today, you run it for 3 years, battery's getting a little weak, better throw it to the side, better get a new phone. That's where the modern car buyer is trending. While a lot of traditional car owners value a vehicle that will go hundreds of thousands of miles, value that vehicle that they can fix themselves, and that is reliable, the fact remains is there's strong headwinds, and the industry is pushing against with technology, smaller engines, turbocharged, direct injection, all the big screens, haptic controls, capacitive controls, CVT transmissions, and the list goes on, means that a lot of people are just conceding. They're throwing their cars away like they're throwing away their cell phones. And that's where the market is changing. There is this acceptance, this growing acceptance that people are just going to continue buying what the industry is throwing their way. Well, the industry is creating a product that essentially is throwaway and largely is based on mandates, largely is based on the fact that most people only keep their vehicle for 2.5 to 3 years anyway before they trade up, it simply doesn't matter. The shareholder bottom line seems to be a bigger driver. That's right. In fact, as well, 95% of the profits go to 5% of the organization's management. The automotive market has shifted from what used to be a passion project to something that is clearly just a commodity, something to make profits, make money, and constantly see these ever increasing shareholder values quarter after quarter. Turbos, hybrids, even Toyota, the likes of one of the most reliable car manufacturers on the planet, are starting to transition into things like turbocharging, hybrids, direct injection, and other technologies that are clearly going to compromise the integrity of lasting 20 years like they used to. So popularity of vehicles like this is constantly on the rise because people don't worry about the complexity. Most buyers these days don't hold on to their vehicles for all that long, and they see a vehicle like that as something to enjoy today because we've worked hard and justify it in that sense. So unfortunately, what we're giving up is a lot of the reliability, durability for the sake of the latest technology. And while that can be exciting, getting into something that's a little more traditional like this simply is not quite as exciting to a lot of owners. And even the likes of Toyotas and Hondas are succumbing to the latest technology trends, which are big screens, which are some of the CVTs. You get the piano finishing like this. You get all of these controls on your steering wheel, as well as a lot of technology that seems to be in the way of electronics. Turn that on and you can see you get fancy graphics in the middle, you get fancy graphics up here, and these are all part of the modern day experience. Of course, everything is going digital and electronic, which is fine. Move with the times. The fact remains is though, most people seem to be okay in buying some of the high performance vehicles with the latest tech. And it doesn't matter to a lot of people that it's a turbo 3 with a hybrid and a direct injection or a CVT transmission. Rather, they know they're not planning to keep it because that's the trend. The industry trend is no longer one in which supports somebody that wants to buy their car and hold on to it for 20 years like a lot of the old classics. And it's amazing at looking at some of these old trucks. You know, I have a friend who just bought themselves a 25-year-old Chevy pickup truck. Here we have a 22, 23-year-old Ram. And you're seeing a lot of these older trucks, older vehicles still driving around. Same thing goes with many of these older Toyotas. You still see a lot of these vehicles on the road, many of them being resurrected simply because of the cost of these new vehicles. And there was a time when hard-earned dollars and high price tags only associated with vehicles like this. But that's changed too, because now pickup trucks are getting exclusively expensive, and it's nothing to find a fully loaded diesel truck that costs almost as much as a modern day Porsche 911. A shift towards more technology, more safety features, more performance, that all comes at a cost. Because even the latest Honda Accord are changing. They're only pretty much hybrid technology, smaller engines, and they too have now compromised some of their older reliability that they used to love. So a lot of people often ask themselves, how did they get to a place from a $30,000 truck merely 20 years ago like this to many modern day trucks like this that are up in that $80,000 to $90,000 territory? We've virtually tripled the price of the vehicles in a mere 15 to 20 years. Truth be told, there's a lot of traditionalists that value a simple vehicle, a lower, simpler cost of maintenance and operation, a vehicle that is cheaper to own and is willing to last for 15, 20, 25 years. There's many owners of vehicles like that. The sad part is the vast majority of the population is looking for technology. The expectations of safety should be in place. Backup cameras have now been mandated. That wasn't even a thing 10 or 15 years ago. A lot of this technology now everybody wants. Nobody wants to pay the price, but they want the technology. They want the safety features. They want the bragging rights. When they go into the showroom, they want to ask for that latest SUV. Does it have the big screen? What size of screen? Does it have integration with CarPlay and Android Auto? Does it do all of these things? Does it have the big screen? Does it even have the big sunroof like that? Everybody wants the features. I mean, inherently under tongue in cheek, a lot of people say, well, it's not that important. I just want a reliable vehicle. But the industry says that the expectation is their new vehicle that they're buying today is going to have a lot of these safety features. It's going to have a lot of this performance. But on the back end, most people know, and we see it traditionally, that the majority of people still prefer to have something that they trade in every 3 to 5 years. Hence why we're seeing high repossession rates. Hence why sales continue to climb even in a cost of living crisis, even when prices are rising, even when the price of housing, food, rent, and overall inflation is rising. Car sales still have a place. And the biggest challenge right now seems to be in the EV space, hybrids and electric vehicles. And that's where the challenges are right now. And it seems to be a very polarizing place. You either love that type of vehicle or you don't love it. And there's very few people caught up in the middle. But the fact remains is cars are still selling. Car manufacturers are still moving metal. Yes, there's a few outliers. Nissan's been struggling with profit loss. Ford's been struggling because of losing money on the sale of a lot of their EVs, like the Lightning and the Mustang Mach-E. Yes, there's been struggles with Stellantis because they got overzealous and they started ripping customers off. And with these high prices, customers say, look, there is a breaking point. And I think they found it and walked over that line.
Yes, contrary to popular belief, most of us love vehicles that last forever, but in reality, most people only keep them for 2 or 3 years, so does it even really matter? The second story, the only vehicles you should be thinking about buying right now, especially during the cost of living crisis, the high price of brand new vehicles, and the trashy used old car vehicles that you're starting to see on the lots today. These are the vehicles you're going to want to buy. With shortages in the used car space, it drives prices up, supply and demand. But sadly, we're seeing junk hitting these car lots. I've never seen such trashy cars, cars with bent rims, cars with scrapes and damage, cars with worn out carpet, cars that are just clearly not in good shape. But what's going on is now the average age of some of these used cars hitting the market is rising. As well, a lot of these dealers are struggling to get inventory, so now they're just scraping the bottom of the barrel and putting trash on their lots. I mean, go walk down some of the car lots, you see a lot of literal trash, junk cars, high miles, worn out parts, and clearly that's just what's on the outside. I mean, it's horrific with what's going on. The auctions are pushing through some junk, and again, the age is going up simply because the quality late model vehicles are no longer available or hard to come by for dealers anyway. Lease returns are down because people weren't leasing with the higher interest rates from a couple of years ago. Now the lagging effect means that there's very few good quality lease returns that are coming back to the market and through the auctions. Unfortunately, even trade-ins, people are holding on their vehicles longer. So once they do trade in, their vehicles tend to be a little older, a little rusty, or a little more beat up, and in some cases a little more neglected. So the quality of the used cars is dropping dramatically. There's these vehicles that are out there that exist, and I personally bought one a few years ago. Actually, I bought it back in 2020, just before the market went silly. People were locking down. I went down to a local dealership, and that was when the prices were still relatively normal. So I bought my car, I went in there, it had a CPO warranty, it was a good quality, low mileage car. I signed on the dotted line, got the extended warranty thrown into it, and usually with certified pre-owned, it's something that's approved by the factory, if you will, or it's at least up to their standards. And pardon the air quotes, but I mean, this whole market is a little bit of shambles, and it's founded in a base of lies. The certified pre-owned warranty generally gives people more of an insurance, a confidence to buy cars that generally have gone through a rigorous check. Certified pre-owned warranties do often, and certified pre-owned vehicles are often based more on quality, vehicles that are, in better shape. They don't have the accident history. Maybe they've had the good maintenance history, and there's certainly a lot more history at the dealership. They might have service records. They know all of the maintenance has been up to snuff. There's no accidents that haven't been underwater. And maybe the mileage is low too. And so you meet those 3 criteria. That sounds like a real winner, doesn't it? Especially when you consider the fact that a lot of these older used vehicles are trash. I've been seeing this all over the place. A lot of old cars, faded headlights being imported from southern states. They're faded, the sun fades taken to them. Some of them have been underwater, rims damaged. Of course, we've seen bumpers and scrapes. I even know somebody here recently who bought themselves a BMW, and it's a great car, it has low mileage, but it's an example of what's going on in the market. It only had something like 11 or 12,000 kilometers on it, but it already had damage on the front bumper. It had some scrapes on the wheels, and it makes you wonder, what do these people do with their cars? Do people not care anymore? I mean, the price of these vehicles are extraordinarily high these days. So why would they neglect or abuse their vehicles? But more to the point, why are dealers not fixing these vehicles before they list them? Well, that's largely because in a lot of cases, they don't want to put a CPO warranty, or they want to maximize their profits, and the less money they can put into that used vehicle to refurbish it, to clean it up, to make it nicer and presentable, the less money they'll have for profits. So quite often now they're using that as a negotiations tactic. They'll use those bumps and bruises and scraped wheels now as a baseline for negotiations. So now you come in there, you're not only negotiating on the price of the vehicle, you're actually negotiating on the damage and repairs and upkeep, where a lot of these dealers are no longer taking care of that, where 5 years ago they would have. It was a total given. You would get your vehicle, it would be tidied up, it would be fixed up, rims would be repaired, and they would all do it on their dime. But now they don't even care. Now they're basically just giving it as is. And if you're not fussy enough to actually challenge a dealer on it, you're going to drive away with a vehicle with low mileage that had been banged around on every curbside. So ultimately, the CPO warranty does some great things for a buyer that maybe isn't as well versed in the understanding of what the car industry has to offer, which is a lot of junk mixed with a few little gems here and there. Now, a lot of people don't want to buy brand new vehicles because they're extraordinarily expensive. We see the prices on new vehicles these days, and they're not getting any cheaper. So that's why there's an ever increasing popularity in the used car marketplace. But the CPO warranty is sort of that splitting that balance right there. You get the older used cars, that 3 to 8 years old on the markets, on the car lots, that are often banged up and bruised and scraped. And, they maybe run well, they have moderate mileage, but there's a little bit of spotty history. Well, those kind of car lots are full. We're seeing a lot of those types of cars all over the place. New, of course, you're paying full beans, plus taxes, paint protection film, floor mats, extra. You're just paying everything. So what about that space in between? Well, there's a space reserved for certified pre-owned vehicles, where it's used, but a lot of the benefits of new. Quality, low mileage, no accident history, sounds almost like the best case scenario. You get the mass majority of the service life, but without all of the cost of buying new, but without having the bangs and the scrapes that you're finding in the used car market. Yes, I too have personally bought a CPO warranted vehicle back in 2000, before the market went absolutely ballistic, and I never regretted a minute of it. The car was everything I dreamed it would be. The third story, yes, there's a new cheap truck. You wouldn't believe it, under $20,000 with incentives. You're gonna wanna find out why Ford is literally rolling in their graves and they're in full panic mode. With the average transaction price of almost $50,000 and the cheapest subcompact vehicles on the market right now, the Kia Soul, the Trax, as well as the Versa, are still over $25,000. If you want a truck, forget about it. Even the Maverick, they say, starts just over $28,000, but the average transaction price of a lot of those Mavericks now are almost $33,000. You can't find a Maverick for cheap and dirty. Right here with the 2-liter comes at a whopping $43,000. $111,000 for this. This one here is $70,375. 6.7-liter turbo diesel. How much is this vehicle? Well, it comes at a significant cost. How about $125,000? But ultimately, there is a new game in town, and it promises with incentives to be under $20,000. Guess what? It's a truck. It converts to an SUV. Most importantly, it's affordable. And what a lot of customers have been asking was they want base and simple. They don't want to pay for all this glamorous technology. They don't want to pay for all of this widgets and all this electronics on the dashboard. Rather, a set of crank windows and a vehicle that's versatile, affordable, and reliable. Guess what? Lo and behold, there is a vehicle called the Slate. There's finally a truck that's going to have Ford quaking in their boots. New Slate Auto is a Michigan-based product, and it even has the support of Bezos, an Amazon product now potentially is going to give it serious legs, because startup vehicles are always going to be a challenge, but Slate actually has the funding and the backing to actually get this vehicle off the ground. While many conventional internal combustion vehicle manufacturers, Mercedes, Benz, Audi, you name it, are looking at coming out with products that are extremely expensive, pushing most buyers out of the market. Not to mention, most buyers are still not totally on board with the idea of electrification, but Slate has a new plan, bringing it affordable to your household near you. How is it going to do that? Well, with simplicity, and that's the key. With crank windows, minimal technology, you don't have the big display, you can run an app off your phone. The idea is minimalism. We've all seen the course of the last 5 years, what's gone with prices. A big part of the price increases of a lot of these vehicles is greedflation, overpriced vehicles, but also a lot of technology. There have been people buying and asking. I was at a recent car show and I was talking to a high-level guy that belonged with General Motors, and he said essentially the customers were looking for that. Customers don't all want these high expensive, high trim vehicles with all the latest bells and whistles, and Slate is answering to a group of people that are just looking for frugal driving experiences. Now, we're currently the only real small pickup truck available is the Maverick, and it starts just over $28,000. That's going to slide Slate right into the sweet spot, undercutting Ford by thousands of dollars. Now, the CEO of Slate says, we're going to put the power back into the hands of the consumers since they've been ignored over the last few years. And we can definitely all agree with that the cost of all of these vehicles have gone absolutely astronomical. Now, it far exceeds the cost of living increases or inflation. So it begs the question, how have vehicles become so expensive? Well, Slate is here to at least speak the lingo and say, look, we're going to give you a cost-effective vehicle that you can drive for your day-to-day needs. Slate's new radical design starts with a 2-seat pickup truck and can easily be converted into a 5-seat SUV. Electric vehicles ride on basically a skateboard type platform, so in other words, adjusting configuration is quite simple with the Slate. Slate claims they don't want to be everything to everyone, and that's quite clear because some people just need a big heavy duty tow vehicle like a diesel. Some people need a full-size truck. Some people want to go off-roading. So there's multitude different reasons of why people buy pickup trucks. But if you're looking for basic essential functionality with short range requirements, this can certainly meet the bill. And the Slate does it with a 52.7 kilowatt hour battery and can get you as much as 150 miles on a single charge. Now, while that doesn't seem amazing, you can get an optional battery pack that bumps it up to 240 miles, but the idea is short runabout, functionality, small pickup bed. Of course, the payload's only 1,400 pounds, so a couple of big dudes at 400 pounds, that chops you down to 1,000. Nonetheless, it can get a lot of your day-to-day truck loading activities done. Now, this new Slate doesn't promise to win any races, particularly against the Model S Plaid. However, in fact, it does offer up 201 horsepower motor that's driven to the rear wheels, and on top of it, a 0 to 60 mile per hour time of around 8 seconds. Means it's not extremely quick, but it's peppy and it'll get the job done. Now, as another startup battery electric vehicle, the Slate offers another key advantage. You don't need that big fancy high volume charging system that you have to install and it cuts into your system, and if you have a house, you're fine, but if you have an apartment, you're not. In fact, the Slate does promise to have enough charging capability to plug into a standard 120 volt outlet and have the vehicle charged entirely overnight. Slate says as well, they have this flat pack accessory kit, which means it gives you all the parts, the airbags, the seats, the seat belts, and the roll bar to functionally convert your pickup truck to that 5-seater SUV. Very easy to do at home, but Slate says they can support you and help you build that too. So the Slate is clearly a very simpleton vehicle. It has very simple textile materials inside for easy cleaning, easy wiping. It doesn't have the big screens. All you have to do is bring your personal phone, plug it into the app, and now you can function appropriately. The beauty with that is you don't have a lot of high dollar technology ready to fail. But the Slate does look to have some of the basic safety technology buried on board, like the automatic emergency braking system or the forward collision warning systems, and up to 8 airbags. Another great feature, which is a lot of customers were asking, okay, when are they going to start selling vehicles directly to the customer? We know Ford was dealing with that a couple years ago, where a lot of customers were looking for it, and the CEO as well as the top players at Ford were looking at doing that, but the franchise dealers themselves all put up in arms. So ultimately, this promises to be more a delivery directly to the consumer. And Slate Press Material says they'll have service capability in your neighborhood. Now, I know there's a little skepticism. A lot of startups have been tried and efforts have been made to try to get a lot of these off the ground. And we've seen many of them have fallen flat on their face. But not all of them have had the support from the likes of Jeff Bezos and Amazon, which could seriously put this heads and tails above the rest and leave the car brands like Ford eating their dust. So is the Slate one of those vehicles you'd think about buying? I mean, if you just need a cheap runabout, it might serve a purpose. I don't know. I'd like to see one in person. The fourth story, there is in fact a car loan crisis. So bad that people and buyers have stopped making payments. They're defaulting. They're letting their vehicles go. They're letting the banks take them away. What's going on? How bad is it really getting? I'm going to explain the whole problem to you now.
With the price of average everyday vehicles like this large Armada, we're seeing a whole host of features on this Pro 4X, and we're seeing price tags of $97,000. And the latest report is the average transaction price for vehicles these days is about $49,000, where merely a few short years ago, back in 2020, it was as little as $38,000, gone up 25% in 5 short years. Part of the issue is not even birds want these smaller, low cost, low price point vehicles. Here we have a little Nissan Kicks, and this is one of their lowest cost alternatives. The birds don't necessarily want one, but they're available, and yet these vehicles have been going down in sales. Rather, the attitudes have been shifting to going to larger SUVs, and as you move up the rank with SUVs, along comes more powerful engines, more technology, and of course increased cost. The average car these days costs way more than they ever did way back many moons ago. But contrary to popular belief, it's not just the research, development, and manufacturing costs. There are vehicles that defy all logic, and a lot of these vehicles are sold at higher price points simply because of their popularity. Supply and demand. Well, we know that happened back in 2021, 22 when shortages hit. And then it really came down to the chip shortages going into the high price point vehicles and popular vehicles that many people were willing to overpay for. Even this little gut buddy's trying to... So with the shortages of vehicles, shortages of on inventory, and the fact that a lot of customers were simply willing to pay more, things like market adjustment fee were something we never heard of years before. But that ultimately drove the average transaction price up for a lot of these vehicles. Again, 20, 25, 30% over the last 5 years. The worst part is average wages didn't go up. Maybe 1, 2, possibly 2.5, 3% year over year. Didn't come anywhere near the increases in cost of housing, food, and again, in terms of car costs. We're now seeing a new phenomenon. Did you hear that 1 in 5 car loans today is of 7 years or longer? Could you imagine buying a car today and not having it paid off till 2032? And because of this phenomenon, we're seeing increased levels of repossessions. A lot of these high-priced vehicles just keep going up, and everybody wants that new shiny toy. They want that newest technology. They want to drive around with a badge. They've worked hard all their life and they feel they deserve it. And while there's some facts to that, and that's what makes the world go round, it can truly be one of those most exciting moments in your lifetime is getting possession of your new keys for your new car. The unfortunate part is many people have been enabled by the OEMs, by the banks, by the lenders to give loans that are much longer than conventional. That was typically 4 to 5 years. So traditionally, I've always liked to take car loans of, say, 3 years. That way, you've got warranty, you're not in negative equity territory too badly, and it usually means that if you're going to afford those monthly payments, you've probably put a sizable down payment to begin with. So usually 3 to 4 years is the sweet spot. But I'll tell you what, I've got a friend that was looking at a $50,000 BMW, and I went on the loan calculator here. I pulled that up. And I said, okay, $50,000, let's assume the worst case, put 0 down or very little down. I put a few $100s down. I accounted for the sales tax, which depends on the state and the province. It could be 5 to 7%, could be as much as 15, 12 or 15%. But I put down 7% on an 8% finance rate, because we know the finance rates can vary, and I've already said that 4 to 5%, maybe 7 to 8% is more average, and used car loans right now are in 13 to 14%. So punching all those numbers into my loan calculator, I found that $50,000 BMW that our friend wanted, that actually when you incorporate the interest rates, very little down, over a 5-year term, not even a 7, but a 5-year term, it actually puts you in a territory where you're spending, and the total time, if you were making those payments throughout the total time period, it would take you up to $65,000. So that $50,000 car is actually going to cost 65 grand. Let's calculate that out. $65,000. Okay. And so then you think about it, in 5 years, it's a BMW. So you've lost in 5 years more than 50%. You've lost more likely 60%, unless it's a specialty car. But I think in this car, this was a pretty generic, it was a 3 Series, 330 or something. A $65,000 cost on a $50,000 vehicle, but that $50,000 vehicle is depreciated down to about $20,000, $25,000, but it's costing you 65 grand, so you've lost $40,000. you've lost $40,000. So I painted that picture for them. I said, look, you're 50 grand, $50,000 car. You've just lost $35,000, $40,000 in 5 years. Now that's after-tax earnings. So you gross that up, and now that $40,000 becomes more like $60,000 gross income. That's a year's full salary. You've pretty much given up. You've eaten that. And that just aggravated me. And when you really started crunching the numbers, even my friend looked at it like, what? I never even thought about it that way. And I pointed out the fact that if you didn't even have a major car repair, because you're dealing with vehicles that are outside of warranty, and a lot of times BMWs or Audis or even any kind of car, it doesn't even matter. You can be dealing with Nissan, for example, with the CVTs, and you blow a CVT transmission outside of warranty, that can cost you $4,000 to $5,000. So we're not even talking about repairs. We're strictly talking about the depreciation coupled up with the cost of borrowing. That $50,000 car you lost in 5 years as much as $40,000.
See, because all these vehicles that are rolling in on the lot all look enticing, and many of these vehicles are going to sell very, very quickly. Okay, sure, Nissan might be a little bit of an exclusion to that conversation. They're struggling these days and literally having a hard time keeping the lights on. But ultimately, generally speaking, the car industry is still selling vehicles at an alarming rate. And how's it happening if they're costing so much and the wages don't follow suit with the increased cost of these vehicles, which we see going up every single year? See, because many more people would much rather drive the latest and greatest, something new with the flashy technology. And while a lot of people love the idea of having a warranty does give you some peace of mind. A lot of people use that as a crutch and a justification that, oh, I need to have a warranty, my car's worn out. Rather, driving a car like this, older, some miles on it, maybe 40, 80,000 miles, a lot of people are ready to toss that to the curb. And yet, quite often, a lot of these vehicles are good for 150 to 200,000 miles if they're looked after. And you could buy an older vehicle for fractions of the cost of some of these new vehicles. Now, new vehicles are wonderful. They do offer that great driving experience. They do offer something this old vehicle doesn't necessarily do the same thing this vehicle does. These are quiet, they purr, they have all the technology. But all of this technology comes at a cost, and that's partially what's been driving these prices up. I talked to a dealer recently, general manager, who said, you know what, the customers have been asking for this. They want the tech, they want the safety features, and in some cases it's mandated. And while he was selling General Motors products, he openly admitted, when the customers ask, we're gonna deliver. But many people choose to throw away their old vehicle, even if they have a lot of service life left in it, and rather step into something big and shiny like this. Here we have the latest Armada, pretty significant amount of money. The Birds also have their own opinions here, but let's take a look at the price of this one here. How about $94,000? Another issue is the cost of borrowing. We're now seeing the average rate for borrowing on your new vehicle in and around that 8%. Sometimes you can get as low as 4.9, 5%, but generally speaking, the interest rates are up around 8%, when back 5 years ago, they were about 5%. But sadly, there used to be a rule of thumb that many lived by, the 24-10 rule, which meant that 20% deposit should go down on your next new vehicle, followed by a maximum of 4 years of borrowing, and of course, no more than 10% of your gross monthly salary on your car payment. See, a big part of the problem with the longer loan terms is twofold. Number one, of course, negative equity. So a lot of people get bored of their cars. They buy it, and then 2 or 3 years later, they want to trade it in for the next shiny toy. Well, when they do that, and they have the long loan term, they're not paying enough down on the principal, and usually they wind up in negative equity or underwater, and they usually have to top it up. So they don't just take the retail value, trade-in value of that vehicle and put it on the next vehicle. Often they have to roll it over because they don't have enough equity built into that vehicle that they've been making payments on for the last 2 years, and ultimately still have to top it up even more. You might have to pull another $10 or $15 or $20,000 out of your pocket to finish off and roll into the next one, or they just keep rolling it to the next, and just you never get out of this vicious cycle until you decide to hold onto a vehicle for 10 years or more, is where you finally can unravel and tighten and get rid of that nasty bit of negative equity. But another big problem is they get into a vehicle like this, they look at this, beautiful, but they can't afford it. It's an Audi, luxury vehicle. I can't afford it outright for 3 or 4 years, as per the rule of thumb, so they decide that they're going to take it out for a 7-year loan term. Well, guess what? The warranty period of these vehicles is only usually for 3 years. bumper to bumper, but the warranty is only good for about 3 years. So usually that means that you're now having to make payments on a car with no amount of warranty, which is why you justified buying that vehicle in the first place. And then you get in a snooker. You have a vehicle that's predominantly an unreliable vehicle, and then you get stuck with a big car payment. What happens if the transmission fails on it? Now you've got a $6,000 repair on a vehicle no longer has warranty, and you're making huge car payments. Why is that? Because car payments right now average about $750 a month, but yet, would you believe it, 1 in 5 or 20% are actually paying over $1,000 a month for their car payment and finding themselves underwater. How do you think we're getting to a position of repossessions? Because now repos are at an alarming high number. We're up in at 6 to 7% on borrowers that are of the subprime nature, and even prime lending borrowers or prime borrowers are still seeing repossessions in that 2, 3, and 4%, unfortunately, these days. And a lot of it has to do with these extraordinarily high-priced vehicles like this one here, ticketed at $105,000.
So if there's anything important you take away from this clip, it's the 24-10 rule. 20% down payment, 4 years maximum, and 10% of your gross monthly earnings go towards your car payments. That's going to keep you above water. The fifth story, we're going to get right into it. I'm going to share some of the most affordable full-size family vehicles available. SUVs, vans, you name it. For growing families and people who need that third row, there's not many on the market, but I'm going to share all of them with you today. I know when we grew up, of course, or our kids grew up, we certainly were looking for vehicles with 3 rows because we had a large family and we always needed something, and we knew the market was pretty tight. Hard to find vehicles like that these days. Well, they do exist, and they do exist in an affordable format. Not everybody wants a fire-breathing Ferrari, but some people want an affordable vehicle that just transports everybody safely to school and work. I'm going to give you that list right now. Let's take this from the top, shall we? The first one on my list, not necessarily the best or in this order, but I'm going to share it with you, is the Mitsubishi Outlander. Starts around $29,000 and change on the US market. Features a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, makes about 184 horsepower. You do get 3 rows. It's wonderful that way. CVT transmission, it's a little whiny, but they're fairly reliable, and they actually are also going for about $36,000 in a Canadian marketplace. Wonderful vehicle, comes with auto dimming lights, LED headlights and washers, front and rear braking, emergency braking, and blind spot monitoring systems. A lot of safety features. So it's a wonderful vehicle, and certainly there are some incentives. No problems, no questions asked. You need to get around in a very, very affordable way. The Outlander has you covered. Now there's another one here that I want to talk about, and the next one on my list is the Kia Sorento. Starts around $39,000 on the Canadian market, but in the US market, they start around $31,000, $32,000 in the LX format. Wonderful vehicle as well. You can get LX trim. You can get a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, making about 191 horsepower, 181 pound-feet of torque. You can actually upgrade that to a turbocharged 2.5 that gives you 281 horsepower. Very, very peppy there. And, you know, the usual gambit of 12.3-inch touchscreens, power driver seats, heated front seats. Those are all nice features. It's a lot of bang for buck. And honestly, the Kia Sorento, we often find them incentivized, and those are running for about $39,000 in the Canadian market. In the US market is starting around $31,900 in LX format. Wonderful vehicle. I was down at the dealership the other day. I looked at these. They're very intriguing, very interesting looking design. And I will say they've come a long way in a lot of their design language by Kia. Again, for anybody looking for a third row vehicle, this might meet the bill. Now, if you want to look at something that's maybe on the luxury side, these are a little bit more money, but the Mercedes GLB has an optional 3-row or 3-row SUV. They're very small, but I sat in there and I actually found, oddly enough, vehicles like the Volkswagen Tiguan, there's no room in the third row. It's pretty much sad. It's for, I don't even know who you put back there. But the Mercedes GLB is also a very small subcompact SUV that actually fits in the third row. A person that's about 5'8", 5'9", 5'10" can quite easily fit back in that third row, upright, without brushing their head, and they've got enough adequate knee room. So if you're looking for a luxury vehicle, Mercedes GLB is one of your best bets at an affordable price point. But enough about that. We're not looking for luxury, we're looking for affordability. And the next one in line is one that I have to express because I've tried these and I absolutely love these vehicles. just about everything from the brand is Mazda is now building some absolute breakout vehicles. You really have to check out Mazda. Maybe it's not a third row. Maybe you're looking for something else. But trust me when I say the CX-5, the CX-50 are the best compact SUVs. The Mazda 3, also amazing. You can get naturally aspirated 2.5s, turbo 2.5s, as well as you can get a manual and a front wheel drive setup. But it's not about that. The reason I'm saying Mazda is because they don't get seen and heard enough. The 3-row SUV you have to look at is the Mazda CX-90. Starts around $45,000 Canadian, or about $37,845 in the US, or base turbo trim. Absolutely wonderful vehicles. The 3-row on these, I found them, I sat in them, they're beautiful. These vehicles are very long. They do feel a little narrow on the inside, but there's more than adequate room. You get a full-size vehicle, full-size room, and it's definitely at a price point most people would agree with. Full hybrids or plug-in hybrids are available with these vehicles. The CX-70 gives you the non-3-row, but if you're looking for 3-row, the CX-90 is the same vehicle, but with a 3rd row. Wonderful vehicles. Top trims, 340 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. In the GS trims, lots of features. Blind spot monitoring, rain-sensing wipers, all kinds of trims and features with these vehicles. They're absolutely glorious. I love the looks of them. They look wonderful. And with that inline turbo 6, they're really trying to follow the recipe of BMW. I love the brand. Mazda these days are really not getting the fanfare that they should. In my own personal opinion, I think the reliability and the quality of those vehicles is really second to none in the business right now. The next one I want to mention is this one here is one that, for the traditionalists, you like the domestic products. Well, how about the Chevy Tahoe? Those start around $56,200 in the US market, or about $76,500 in the Canadian market. 4-wheel drive, 5 trims, you get the Yukon. Of course, you get the 17-inch infotainment screen. You get LS trim is a rear-wheel drive, but generally people ramp up. So base trim is 2-wheel drive, but you can step that up. You do get the LS at a 5.3 liter V8, makes about 355 horsepower. It's a very peppy engine. I know the 5.3 is a great engine that way. The cylinder deactivation, that's another conversation, but it's a wonderful vehicle that's actually fairly large. It's built on the pickup truck platform, and a lot of people love these. There's popular, there's 3 rows available, and you can really haul a lot of people. You can haul your boat to the cabin on the weekend, and they're very, very versatile. Now, maybe some of you are looking for something a little bit different, possibly more in the minivan space. Here's one for you. How about the Kia Carnival? Now, I'm not the biggest fan, but they are kind of quirky looking, and there's not a lot in the minivan space. We've got the Chrysler minivan. That's a Dodge product. It's not the most amazing in my own personal opinion. Honda's got the Odyssey. Toyota's got, of course, their version, which is the Sienna. They're both beautiful, but they're both somewhat costly. You can avoid those significant cost increases by going with a vehicle like the Kia Carnival. Gives you all of the versatility in 3 rows if you like minivans, because the access, SUVs quite often, they're higher, they're 4-wheel drive, harder to get in and out, less versatile for the kidlings. But if you need something that's more versatile for young ones, the Kia Carnival is one of those that might be on your radar. You might want to check it out. They start around $36,800 and round up all the way to $53,000 in the US market. The LX trim starts at that base 36 and change. But on the Canadian market, they start around $40,000. Now, they're wonderful vehicles, very affordable, cheap. 3.5 liter V6 makes 288 horsepower. So what's kind of nice is it's more of a conventional drivetrain where everybody's going hybrids and all of this new technology. They're keeping it a little bit simpler, which for a lot of people is just the ultimate and way to go. But of course, as you know, they have a fairly comprehensive warranty. 5 years, 100,000 kilometers, and the powertrain for 5 years and 100,000 kilometers. So vehicles you might look at: Chrysler Pacifica, Honda Odyssey, Toyota Sienna, and the Grand Caravan, which I already mentioned. Most of those are either poorer quality or more expensive. So this one fits in the niche nicely. Another one, a 3rd row, if you're thinking about maybe an EV, is the EV9. The EV9, also a very fascinating looking vehicle. Now, you may not be on board with electric vehicles, but if you need an electric vehicle that's 3-row, there's not that many on the market. Guess what? Kia's got you answered there at $59,995 on the Canadian market.
You can also find them in the US market for a little bit of a different price tag that starts around 55 grand and swings all the way up to about 79,000 bucks. Of course, they're good for 6 passengers. And honestly, they're the competition would be like the EQS by Mercedes-Benz, the R1S Rivian, the Tesla Model X, and the Volvo EX90. Of course, there's some other options, but these ones do fall in a more of affordable price point for a 3-row SUV, right? 3-row electric vehicle SUV. There's not many of those to pick from, and they definitely meet the criteria.
So do any of these appeal to you? Yeah, there's a couple, 1 or 2 in there that I would consider buying if I was in the market. Currently right now, we're on the downsizing, but certainly when I was buying and we were growing our family, definitely there's a couple of these would very much appeal to me. And with all of that said, be sure to check out that. Why are used BMWs so cheap? And why are used Jaguars so cheap? Very popular videos. It's going to explain the whole story, especially even if you're thinking about buying a luxury car. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you all real soon, everybody. Bye-bye.